I just found out I'm pregnant. But when I got home, what waited for me wasn't a congratulations, but a note my husband left saying he was moving his mistress into the lakefront villa. But they have no idea what's waiting for them there. I'm Natalie Morgan. And what about you? If you found out your husband left you for his mistress while you're pregnant, what would you do? Leave a comment below. Let's see if we share the same answer. I was holding the pregnancy test results in my hand. A new life was forming inside me. I'm pregnant. But when I got home, what greeted me wasn't an embrace, but an empty, cold silence and a neatly folded note on the oak table. The handwriting was Nathan's. I recognized every stroke, but each sentence choked me. He wrote that Alyssa, the broke college student he'd been supporting all these years, had just come back from Australia, that he was bringing her to live in the lakefront villa, the one I bought just a few months ago, and that for the next 2 months, he'd be busy and wouldn't come home. I read it over and over, but I still couldn't believe it. A dry explanation, a decision already made without me even existing in it. That villa, it had been empty since the auction, and I was the one who signed the transfer papers myself. It's a beautiful property, but it's in a flood-prone area during storm season. I thought long and hard before buying it, fully aware of the flash flood risks, but I accepted it because the price was unbeatable. Now, imagining Nathan moving Alyssa in there, right when a Category 2 storm warning had just been issued, I called Nathan. My phone was dying, but it wouldn't connect. I looked at the note again. I won't be home for now. Alyssa just got back. I'm helping her settle in. Transfer the villa to her name. Honestly, we owned so many properties together that losing one shouldn't matter. But that lakefront villa was different. It was part of my financial strategy, not some gift Nathan could casually hand out to dress up a delusional affair. I called my father-in-law, hoping he'd talk some sense into Nathan. But all I got back was irritation mixed with the chaotic noise of a casino in the background. He was losing at the tables, more invested in a football bet than his son's marriage. He snapped at me, told me I was overreacting, said Nathan could live wherever he wanted, and even implied I was worthless, living off Nathan's money without earning a dime myself, that I should stay quiet. Then he hung up. I just stood there, strangely calm, even though inside, another wound had opened. Yes, I haven't worked an 8-hour office job for years like he thinks. I'm not the kind of woman grinding at a desk just to prove my worth. I manage real estate portfolios, build long-term investments, attend charity galas, expand social networks. But that doesn't mean all the money is Nathan's. I don't have a monthly salary, but I have decision-making power over assets most people could only dream of. When I first met Nathan, he had nothing but a college degree from a prestigious school. A degree, a name, but behind it was an emptiness. No connections, no resources, no safety net. Back then, Nathan was just a young man with an old suitcase and calloused hands from endless temporary jobs. Years spent hustling in the city, from small projects to short-term contracts. And at the end of it all, he was just another low-level employee barely scraping by month to month. That's when I met him. And maybe, if I hadn't seen something in Nathan, a genuine effort, a quiet ambition, a persistence so reckless it bordered on desperation, I would never have chosen to step into this marriage. I thought back then, all he needed was a chance, and I was the one who gave it to him. On our wedding day, he didn't have a single dollar to put toward buying a house. I wrote a check for $2 million, the seed money, and placed it in his hands, along with my family's entire network of contacts and resources. I called every partner, arranged every meeting, laid the first bricks for the company people now still call Nathan's. And indeed, The company started to grow. Cash flow stabilized. Contracts were won. The team expanded. Nathan went from an anonymous office worker to a promising young entrepreneur, appearing at conferences, landing on magazine covers, being called all the glittering names he never even dared dream of back then. But there's one thing few people know. On paper, the company is under Nathan's name, but the initial capital came from me. Under state law, that shareholding places me in the position of having full controlling rights, which means that, beyond that business card with CEO printed in bold, in essence, Nathan is just a senior employee working for me. I never said it. I've never needed to say it. But I think Nathan has forgotten that fact, or worse, he's chosen to forget. A few years ago, when the company reached a certain level, Nathan started talking about giving back to society. He proposed a scholarship program for underprivileged students. In the press, they called him a philanthropic businessman. But I knew well, it was just a PR strategy to polish his image. They photographed him handing out certificates, printed a few inspiring quotes, and called it a golden heart. I didn't care. Media will always need a narrative. What I didn't expect was that Nathan chose a girl named Alyssa. He talked about her eyes, his voice dropping, softening in a way I had never heard before. He said Alyssa's eyes were resilient, just like his when he first stepped into the world. He said she was a reflection of himself, a pure, struggling version, with an extraordinary will. I remember the first time I heard Nathan say that. I just smiled, because I knew those exact eyes were the same thing that made me choose Nathan years ago. After graduation, he didn't just support Alyssa through college. He even sent her to Australia for graduate school. For 2 years, I watched company funds steadily flow out. Tuition, living expenses, plane tickets. But in the end, Alyssa came back without even a degree. I thought it would end there. But no. Nathan decided to help her enroll in a new MBA program. And then, as if I didn't exist in this world, he quietly took her to the lakefront villa I had successfully won at auction last year. No warning, no message, not even the bare minimum of a conversation between husband and wife. But that wasn't the most absurd part. Nathan said he wanted to transfer the villa's ownership to Alyssa. A multi-million-dollar asset, a strategic piece of real estate, and he treated it like a love token. I remember the moment I read that sentence. I went still for a few seconds. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I just felt intrigued. Because Nathan truly believes he holds the power. He thinks that villa belongs to him. He thinks he can take anything in this house and use it to build his own crown. But what he doesn't understand is, in this game, I'm the one who sets the rules. And people who forget that often pay a very, very high price. I placed my hand gently on my stomach, inhaled deeply, and exhaled slowly, trying to steady my heartbeat. The doctor had warned me that stress during pregnancy wasn't good for the baby. I reminded myself to stay calm, the way I've always done all these years, controlling my emotions, controlling everything in this life. The villa was so quiet today that I could hear the ticking of the wall clock. But that was fine. Silence, at the very least, gave me a moment of peace to think. I stood up, made myself a glass of juice, the fresh, sweet scent drifting softly through the air. Then I sank into the long sofa, the cool velvet pillow beneath my back, closing my eyes for a few seconds to listen to the wind brushing past the window. Suddenly, the phone on the table vibrated gently. I reached for it, and the blue light on the screen lit up with a single notification. Willow Lake Estate is requesting power restoration. Do you approve? My lips curved slightly. Willow Lake Estate. I knew exactly what was happening. When I bought the villa, I had installed a fully integrated smart home system: security cameras, fingerprint locks, signal blocking mode, all connected directly to the primary owner's phone. And the owner here is me. Every single utility, power, water, or any system inside, needed my authorization to operate. When I got the notification that Nathan's had brought Alyssa there, I activated the signal lock mode, completely cutting off all mobile connections within the villa. Now, seeing this notification, it meant Nathan was standing inside, trying to turn the power on, and failing. I opened the surveillance app. The screen lit up with more than a dozen wide-angle camera feeds, capturing every corner of the villa. I zoomed in on one of them. And there he was, in the stifling, windowless electrical room, crouched down, his white shirt clinging to his back with sweat, every tendon along his neck standing out under the faint, harsh glow of the emergency light. That room had been sealed off for weeks, and the damp air from the nearby lake made the atmosphere heavy, almost suffocating. Nathan was fumbling in front of the breaker panel, twisting switches with growing frustration. I saw beads of sweat sliding down his neck, dripping onto the cold cement floor. He tried everything he could, flipping every breaker off and on, one by one, but nothing worked. On the screen, I saw him straighten up, both hands pressed on his knees, his breathing ragged. Then, suddenly, he flung the screwdriver aside, the sharp clang of metal against concrete ringing out clearly. And then, Nathan slammed his right hand down hard on the breaker panel, cursing under his breath. "This damn piece of junk!" I rested my elbow on the sofa arm, leaning closer to the screen, my finger hovering over the confirmation button. And at the exact moment Nathan slammed his hand down a second time, I tapped Approve Power Restoration. The lights on the screen flared bright. The ventilation fan in the room started spinning slowly. Nathan jerked his head up, startled, the sudden light washing over his sweat-soaked face. I sat completely still, my hand still wrapped around the glass of juice, eyes locked on the image. A cold smile flickered across my lips, unseen by anyone, because in this game, I was the one who flipped the switch. A sharp click came from the system, and a blue spark flashed across the breaker panel. Nathan jolted violently, his body convulsing as if something yanked him backward, then slammed hard against the concrete floor. The sound echoed through the tiny speakers in the system, making me raise an eyebrow, take a slow sip of water, and sink deeper into the sofa. At the exact moment Nathan hit the ground, the entire villa lit up. The hallway lights flickered on all at once, and the ventilation fan in the room began spinning slowly. From outside the camera's frame, a figure rushed in, voice bright with excitement. "The power's back! Nathan, you're amazing! Alyssa!" The smile on her lips barely had time to bloom before it froze when her gaze fell to the floor. Nathan lay curled up, both hands clutching his chest, his face twisted in pain, tears from the shock mixing with sweat and sliding down his temples. Alyssa panicked, instinctively reaching to help him up. But as she bent down, she froze and screamed, her voice cracking in terror. "Oh my God, your hair!" I slowly set my coffee cup down on the table. Almost instantly, a laugh slipped out of my throat, quiet but loud enough to fill the silence of the room. On the screen, Nathan had just been jolted so hard he was thrown backward, and the shock burned away the hair he'd carefully groomed as part of his polished, successful entrepreneur image. Alyssa was so frantic, she began pacing in tight circles around Nathan like a bird trapped in a cage, completely lost on what to do. I watched the chaos through 4 camera angles at once, tilted my head slightly, and tapped the microphone button on the control app. Aren't you going to save him? Third floor drawer, right-hand side. There's a first aid kit. My voice carried through the built-in speakers in the electrical room. The instant my words filled the space, Alyssa jumped violently, her eyes going wide, scanning the room as though someone had just whispered right behind her. Who's talking? Her voice trembled on every syllable. I should have clarified, but I deliberately kept my tone low, steady, and cold. The electrical room was built separate from the main house for safety, and the inside was stripped bare. Peeling plaster walls, a low wattage light flickering overhead, jagged shadows sliding across the cement floor. Through the camera, the scene looked like something ripped straight out of a low-budget horror movie. Alyssa's eyes darted wildly, finding no one, and her face drained white. Suddenly, she let out a blood-curdling scream, her voice echoing off the concrete. "Nathan! There's a ghost in this room!" Nathan was still sprawled on the floor, half conscious, half gone. But Alyssa's scream, paired with the burning pain searing across his hand from the shock, jolted him halfway back to awareness. He tried to push himself up, gritting out between clenched teeth. "Ah! My hand! It's burning!" Startled, Alyssa loosened her grip, only to realize her own fingernails had nearly pierced through his skin. Her fingertips trembled, her lips stuttering. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Nathan!" Nathan clenched his jaw tighter, his eyes rolling back as his head slumped to the side. From the high-angle camera, I caught his expression, and for a second, I thought he was about to pass out. Alyssa shrieked, lunging forward, grabbing his shoulders with both hands, shaking him frantically. "Nathan! Wake up! Please, I'm scared!" On the screen, Nathan's limp body rocked back and forth with each desperate shake. I leaned back into the sofa, laughing so hard my stomach ached, tears stinging the corners of my eyes. Through the connected speaker system, I could hear my own laughter reverberate through the villa. The sound distorted, stretching, bouncing between the 4 concrete walls until it sounded almost inhuman. Alyssa froze instantly, her entire body locking up. I saw her try to stand, trying to run, but her legs refused, buckling beneath her, as if drained of all strength. And then, with no other choice, she turned back, shaking Nathan even harder this time. "Nathan! Wake up!" Finally, Nathan let out a faint groan, his lips trembling as he forced out broken, shaky words. "Stop. Shaking. Me. I'm going to—" Alyssa leaned closer, desperate. "You're going to what?" And before she even had a chance to react, Nathan's mouth opened wide, and he vomited violently. The camera caught everything, every single frame. They were far too close, and Alyssa took the full hit. Even just watching through the screen, I felt my stomach churn slightly, like something was caught in my throat. Alyssa's face, usually so polished, always carefully made up with flawless foundation and that fake practice smile, was now smeared with a pale, viscous mess slowly dripping down her chin. The pungent, acrid mix of alcohol and acid seemed to cut straight through the screen. Nathan had thrown up all over her face. I couldn't tell if Alyssa was in shock or if her brain had simply shut down for a moment, but she stood frozen, her wide-open eyes staring blankly into the void as if the entire world had just collapsed. Honestly, I doubted she'd even processed what had just happened. Nathan, though, was different. After he finished vomiting, he hunched over, gasping for breath, his shoulders shaking before he braced a hand against the wall and tried to push himself up. I saw him grimace, swaying slightly, his left arm trembling as he lifted it. And instead of doing the obvious, taking Alyssa to wash her face, He clumsily reached out, trying to smear his damp, booze-soaked hand across her cheek. The move was instinctive, awkward, and disgusting enough that I couldn't hold back. Are... are you okay? Nathan stammered hoarsely, his voice rough and cracked. But Alyssa stood there like a ghost, unresponsive. Her eyes stayed locked, unblinking, her lips moving soundlessly. Watching that scene, I have to admit, something inside me stirred. A strange mix of revulsion and dark amusement. I tilted my head, propped my chin on my palm, and deliberately switched on the microphone, my voice casual, mocking on purpose. Instead of wiping her face with your hand, why don't you take her to wash up, Nathan? Because right now, this is really not a good look for either of you. The moment my voice spilled through the room's built-in speakers, Alyssa finally flinched. Her eyelashes fluttered rapidly before she turned to Nathan, her face paling so fast it was almost gray. And then, with a shaky, trembling whisper, she asked, Did you hear that? At that point, Nathan's daze started clearing. Even after a mild electric shock, his head must still have been spinning, but I knew my voice he would recognize instantly. He lifted his gaze, scanning the ceiling, then lowered his tone. Colder, tight with suppressed anger. Natalie Morgan, it's you, isn't it? You planted cameras to spy on me, and you're trying to electrocute me to death? I let out a soft laugh, calm but laced with sharp, deliberate mockery. Don't be ridiculous, Nathan. You stuck your own hand in the breaker panel, flipping switches like a child. You got yourself shocked. I paused briefly, lowering my voice, slow and cutting, letting each word fall like ice. And another thing, who gave you permission to bring that woman into my villa? That's called trespassing. Getting electrocuted in there is nothing less than what you deserve. I pressed the words carefully, just loud enough for Alyssa to hear, but my tone stayed cool and composed, like I was teaching a reckless intruder the basic law of property rights. I continued, How many times did I call you, Nathan? You didn't bother to answer once. Do you think my villa is a hotel? Do you think there aren't cameras here? You planned to sneak around, hoping I'd cover my eyes, my ears, and pretend not to notice? Nathan said nothing. I watched him swallow hard, his jaw tightening, his hands curling into fists. In that brief silence, I knew he understood perfectly. He had no defense. Deep down, Nathan already knew. If his only goal had been turning the power back on, one phone call would have been enough. He just had to say a single word to me. But he didn't. He chose to bring Alyssa there without a word, and this outcome was the price of his arrogance. I leaned back into the chair, exhaling slowly. A quiet pause stretched between us. In my mind, images of Nathan from the early years flickered. Back when he was still an ordinary employee, his paycheck barely covering rent for a one-bedroom apartment. Back when he was humble, when he'd hold my hand and look at me with nothing but love in his eyes. But somewhere along the way, after the company grew, everything shifted. He began to believe that everything he had today was the result of his own hard work. From an unknown, nameless employee, Nathan climbed into the image of a brilliant young entrepreneur. And the higher he rose, the more convinced he became that everything, the company, the properties, the villas, even me, his wife, was under his control. He forgot, or maybe chose to forget, that from the very beginning, every door he ever walked through was opened by my family, by my father's money, my mother's connections, my family's name, and our reputation. I discovered Nathan's affair 3 months ago, when his credit card statement suddenly showed unusual spikes. A hidden payment, sent to a boutique hotel in Santa Monica, The kind of fully equipped place where Nathan even booked a private saltwater spa. And coincidentally, on the exact same day, he texted me saying he had a shareholders meeting running late into the night. I laughed bitterly. From that moment, I started checking everything: his phone, his emails, his travel schedules, even the security cameras at the properties under my name. What Nathan never knew was that the so-called private phone he hid under the Tesla seat had long been synced into my management system. I opened the app, dragged the thermostat slider from 72 degrees Fahrenheit down to 58 degrees Fahrenheit. 5 minutes later, Alyssa started shivering, her arms wrapped around herself like a soaked little bird. Why? Is it so cold? Nathan frowned, searched for the thermostat panel, but instantly realized this was a smart home. Every system required my authorization. Without me, he had no control over anything. He tilted his head back and shouted, "Natalie Morgan! Have you had enough?" I laughed softly, leaning into my chair. I poured myself another glass of juice, walked calmly out to the balcony. Outside, the rain had started to fall lightly. The weather forecast said a Category 2 storm warning would be issued in an hour. Perfect for a night of chaos. Nathan never understood me. I used to love him. I used to believe in his vow of loyalty. But when betrayal came, I wanted Nathan to feel this helplessness. I wanted him to understand. Everything he thought he could hide was over. I went back to the sofa just in time to see, through the camera, Nathan taking off his suit jacket and draping it over Alyssa's shoulders, his voice soft, dripping with honey. "Baby, put this on. You'll feel warmer. Do you want to take a hot shower?" Alyssa's cheeks flushed as she nodded. They climbed the stairs together, Nathan leaning in to whisper something in her ear that made her lightly slap his chest, giggling shyly. I switched to the bathroom camera. I didn't interrupt. I just sat there. He quickly began unbuttoning his shirt. Suddenly, Alyssa froze, pointing up at the ceiling, her voice trembling. "Wait! There's a camera in here too?" Nathan froze for a beat, then shrugged casually. "So what?" "If she wants to watch, let her watch all she wants." He wrapped his arm around her waist again, but this time she jolted as if electrocuted, clutching the towel tightly against her body, curling up in the corner, her eyes wide with fear. "No! No, we can't! What if she records us? I don't want to be famous like that." I stayed seated, my hand resting on the armrest of the sofa, eyes fixed on the screen as if I were watching a terrible performance from a front-row VIP seat I paid for. Nathan sighed, then walked off to grab tools to dismantle the camera, not forgetting to turn on the bathroom heater and press a glass of wine into Alyssa's shaking hands. Nathan bolted out of the room, sprinting straight down to the basement without a second's hesitation. I watched through the cameras, the corner of my lips curling into a cold smile. Normally, Nathan had never set foot down there, yet today he moved as if he knew every corner by heart. I leaned back slightly, musing to myself, "Nathan, you seem a little too familiar with this place. Looks like you were planning to turn this villa into your private little hideout for the two of you." He didn't respond, didn't even glance up, just kept his head down, tearing through the storage room, his hands trembling with impatience. In his mind, I didn't exist anymore. The only thing that mattered to him was destroying the bathroom camera so he could be with Alyssa without leaving any evidence. When he finally found the folding ladder and a hammer, his hands were shaking so hard I could see his knuckles turning white on the screen. Just a few more seconds, and without me, he would have gone back upstairs and smashed the entire surveillance system to pieces. But at the exact moment his grip tightened around the hammer, I pressed the remote lock. The storage room door slammed shut instantly. Nathan jolted, lunged at the handle, twisting it violently, but it didn't budge. God damn it! His roar echoed through the basement as he kicked the door hard, again and again. I saw his face contort, flushing red, looking like a man cornered with nowhere left to run. Natalie, open this door right now! I rested my head against the chair, smiling with measured restraint. Nathan, did you forget again? I let the silence hang for a beat, and then added, my voice flat and cutting, Every lock in this villa is under my control, isn't it? I leaned closer to the camera, my tone low and razor sharp. Stay right there. Right now, silence is the safest choice you've got. I switched the screen over to the bathroom camera. Alyssa had already drained the glass of wine, her cheeks flushed bright red under the heater's glow, beads of sweat glistening on her forehead. I watched her breathing quicken, muttering faintly, It's so hot. Stumbling unsteadily, she walked toward the control panel, pressing the switches over and over, but the system didn't respond. She looked up at the camera, her voice trembling as if she were pleading, Can you please turn off the heater for me? I leaned back into the chair and answered calmly, No can do, Alyssa. Nathan turned that heater on for you, remember? As I spoke, I dragged the thermostat slider higher, and, almost as an afterthought, I turned on the hot water shower. A faint hiss rang out, followed by the sound of scalding water gushing violently from the shower head. Within seconds, white steam billowed, swallowing the entire room. Alyssa screamed, jumping back, frantically twisting the knobs, but nothing worked. The entire system had already been locked from my phone. Steam thickened, fogging up the mirrors until the entire bathroom transformed into a suffocating sauna. Alyssa looked pitiful, stumbling around like a drenched bird, her soaked bathrobe clinging tightly to her skin, her once perfectly styled curls now plastered to her flushed, panicked face. On the screen, the digital thermometer climbed to 113 degrees Fahrenheit. I heard her pounding on the door, her voice cracking under panic. Open the door! Please, let me out! I glanced at the split-screen view. On the left, Nathan hammering helplessly at the locked storage door. And on the right, Alyssa spinning in circles, trapped in a cloud of steam, terrified and drenched. Outside, the rain had started pouring heavily, pounding against the glass panels in relentless waves, like the perfect soundtrack to this unfolding play. I sat there, watching Alyssa through the screen. She finally collapsed, her trembling hands gripping the edge of the sink, her forehead pressed against the cold, fogged-up mirror, her breath ragged, her voice breaking into sobs, choked and desperate. I was wrong. I know I messed up. You have every right to be angry, but if you kill me, you'll go to prison. I tapped the mic button, my voice filling the bathroom, soft but sharp as ice. Do you think I'm the only one who wants to deal with you? Alyssa froze instantly, her sobs catching in her throat, her wide, terrified eyes locked on the camera. I tilted my head slightly, as if whispering an old secret. The name Charles sounds familiar, doesn't it, Mrs. Langley? Her lips trembled uncontrollably. Of course she knew. During her 2 years in Australia, Alyssa didn't earn a single degree, but her millionaire hunting career soared. I knew every detail. She dropped out of school, took a job as a caregiver at the largest private hospital in Melbourne, where wealthy old men were treated. And there, she caught Charles Langley, a wealthy magnate. Alyssa cared for the old man so diligently that it ended with a legal overseas marriage. When Charles's health declined and he ended up in the ICU, she exploited his delirium to draft a new will. Then she came back here, using an MBA program as a smokescreen. Her real goal had always been to secure her place as the heir to the Langley empire. And Nathan, of course, knew everything. That's why he pampered her, why he wanted a divorce from me. These two, they were a perfect match, one who knew how to exploit opportunities, and one delusional enough to believe he controlled everything. I was still watching the two of them, broken and pathetic on the surveillance screens, when the doorbell rang. I glanced at the secondary monitor. The image came up sharp. A young man in a perfectly tailored suit, standing in the heavy rain, a black Mercedes parked behind him. I buzzed the gate open. "Good evening, Ms. Morgan. I'm Ethan." A deep, calm voice greeted me. Ethan, the only son of Charles Langley. If Alyssa hadn't entered the picture, he would have been the rightful heir. Up until now, we'd only spoken on the phone. This was our first time meeting face to face. Ethan was in his mid-20s, clean-cut hair, dark glasses, an ordinary appearance, but his eyes were sharp and cold. "How are they?" he asked immediately, wasting no time. I gestured for him to sit and pointed at the screen. "Nathan's locked in the tool room. Alyssa's trapped in the bathroom. They're both still alive." Ethan glanced at the monitor, the corner of his lips curling. "Looks like they can still endure." "No rush." I offered him a seat and replied evenly. "We still have about an hour before the floodwater reaches here." Outside, the rain hammered down harder, as if underscoring my words. Ethan nodded and pulled a thick file from inside his jacket, opening it as he spoke. "Everything you requested is almost ready. This includes all the documents for transferring your company to the Langley Group and your villa. All that's left is your signature." He placed a sleek black bank card on the table. "Our finance department finalized the valuation, and I must say, the $200 million you requested is perfectly reasonable." I picked up the card, spinning it slowly between my fingers, the light catching on its glossy surface. Ethan's gaze lingered on me, curious. "One thing I don't understand. The company's shares are all under your name. Why sell? If you keep them, the value will only grow. Whether Nathan lives or dies, ownership remains yours." Ah, so this was a test. I bit into a piece of fruit and answered calmly. "For years, Nathan's been running the company. Everyone from top to bottom is loyal to him. If I wanted to regain control, it'd be an uphill battle. And if I can't control it, selling is the better choice." Ethan paused for a moment, then let out a soft chuckle, adjusting his glasses. "Aren't you worried Nathan's father, that old gambling addict, will come after you? Legally, the company's profits from recent years fall within the marriage. If Nathan dies, his father has a claim to half." I rolled the pen between my fingers, lowering my gaze slightly as I spoke slowly, deliberately. "Then he can take it up with your people." "It won't have anything to do with me." I signed my name cleanly across the documents, then extended my hand toward Ethan. "From this moment on, the company, the villa, none of it has anything to do with me anymore." Ethan smiled faintly, grasping my hand firmly. "A pleasure doing business with you, Ms. Morgan." Looking at the young man in front of me, his demeanor calm, almost polite, but his eyes dark and unreadable, I let out a quiet sigh inside. Alyssa had always believed that getting hold of Charles's will was her golden ticket to a new life. She was naive enough to think that wealthy families were pure and transparent, like blank sheets of paper, never realizing that in every empire there are shadows, there are hidden rules. And the Langley family was no exception. What Alyssa thought was her first-class seat on a diamond train had, in reality, become the very coffin pulling her down to the bottom. From the moment I discovered Nathan and Alyssa's affair, I had hired a private investigator. But what surprised me was that it was Ethan himself who reached out first, bringing me a thick file, pages upon pages filled with unsettlingly detailed evidence about their sordid relationship and Nathan's schemes against me. On every page, one truth stood out clearly. The only rightful and legitimate heir of the Langley Empire, past, present, and future, could only be Ethan. His voice wasn't harsh when we first spoke, but the confidence behind his words was enough for me to trust him. From then on, we began to stay in touch. Ethan asked about Nathan's routines, his habits, his weaknesses. When I told him Nathan loved fishing, Ethan immediately suggested an idea. The conglomerate had a lakefront villa up for sale, located in a flood-prone zone, priced at just a third of its true market value. And that's when the plan began to take shape. Ethan used the information I provided to strategically seed targeted ads for the villa everywhere Nathan would see them, on his phone apps, on the TV channels he watched, even on the giant digital billboards outside the mall. Every encounter felt accidental, but every coincidence had been orchestrated. And with someone like Nathan, obsessed with fishing and desperate to flaunt his image, it didn't take long before he took the bait. "So, what do I need to do?" I had once asked. Ethan's quiet laugh came through the phone. "All you need to do is remind him that none of this, none of the assets, are under his name. Make him feel the emptiness in his hands. Once he feels cornered, men like him walk straight into the trap on their own." I agreed. I even mentioned Nathan's father, a chronic gambler drowning in debt. Ethan went silent for a few seconds, then replied immediately, "Let the debt pile up. Push the father to ask his son for money. Nathan's cash flow is tight. He'll break faster that way." Even though the villa only cost $2 million, for someone like Nathan, a so-called senior executive, which in reality just meant an employee on my family's payroll, it was still an unbearable weight. I would pretend not to know about his affair with Alyssa, but every now and then, I would drop quiet reminders where everything he had truly came from. A man simmering with resentment naturally seeks escape, especially someone like Nathan, successful on the outside, but at his core, broke and insecure, carrying a fragile ego. Every time he came home to a house he didn't want to return to, seeing that villa by the lake, the one he once dreamed of, now under my name, it was inevitable. He'd want to take Alyssa there. And now, Ethan and I sat side by side on the sofa, watching the live feed from the surveillance cameras projected on the TV. Floodwater had already begun to seep into the villa's grounds, inch by inch swallowing the golden cage Nathan and Alyssa had so willingly walked into. On screen, Nathan was frantically pounding on the steel door of the tool room, the rising water already up to his waist. I let out a quiet sigh. Ethan, thinking I was worried, adjusted his glasses and spoke in a steady, almost casual voice. "Don't worry, Miss Morgan. This entire area was evacuated a month ago, just like no one stopped them from walking into the villa now. No one's coming to save them." His tone was calm, like he was discussing morning tea. I kept my eyes on the screen. Nathan was holding his phone high above the water, his face pale as paper. No signal. Ethan smirked faintly. "See? Now that phones know better than a rock." Nathan stumbled toward the camera, his soaked white shirt clinging tightly to his body, his voice breaking as he screamed, "Natalie! I was wrong! Please, help me! Open the door!" I leaned closer to the mic, my voice soft, deliberate. "Actually, you already have the key." I paused, letting the silence stretch, then added slowly so he could catch every word. When I installed the new digital locks for the villa, I had a backup lock added. All you need to do is place our wedding ring into the slot, and the door will open. The screen froze for a moment. Nathan went completely still, his wide eyes filling with horror. His trembling hand reached for his ring finger. Bare. He had taken the ring off long ago to convince Alyssa his love was real. And right in that moment, I watched a man unravel entirely before my eyes. His whole body slumped, collapsing into the rising water, as though all strength had been drained out of him. Ethan lifted his teacup, taking a slow sip before murmuring with a faint smile. "So that's why you sighed? Looks like he didn't bring the ring." Before his words even faded, the TV screen suddenly glitched into static. The camera feed cut off. I placed the villa's control device into Ethan's hand, my voice calm, steady. "From this point on, their fate no longer has anything to do with me." I walked Ethan to the door, watching his black Mercedes disappear into the gray curtain of rain. My footsteps felt lighter than they had in years, as if I had just placed the final period on a chapter I had patiently endured for far too long. The villa was silent now, nothing but the sound of wind sweeping through the glass windows. And in that silence, for the first time, I felt truly at peace. The next morning, I went to the police station myself, calmly filing a report that Nathan had been missing for over 24 hours. I sat under the bright fluorescent lights of the investigation room, resting my hands gently on my belly as the officer recounted how the security footage showed Nathan's car speeding out toward the evacuated lakeside area. No one had seen him since. I nodded quietly, not a single tear falling. Sometimes, silence is the clearest form of goodbye. 6 months later, my belly round and full, I moved into a luxury postnatal care center in another city. My VIP suite was flooded with morning sunlight, the faint scent of lavender lingering in the air, the white curtains swaying softly in the early breeze. I leaned back in the armchair, running my hand gently over the curve of my belly, feeling the tiny kicks of the life growing inside me. A nurse asked if I had chosen a name for the baby yet. I smiled, shaking my head. Not yet. But one thing's certain. It will carry the Morgan name. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in my place, after everything Nathan has done, how would you want him to pay? A quiet disappearance? Or a public trial where he's forced to bow before the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because sometimes your perspective might open a new way forward for someone else who's listening. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button